Good evening, readers. It's Tilly here from Tilly's Shelf, and today I'm here to do another short review. Today it's going to be They Came to Baghdad by Agatha Christie. So that's the first book in this rather glamorous 1950s Agatha Christie collection that was brought out by HarperCollins. And in here there were 4 different books that were written. I think the first, They Came to Baghdad, was published in 1951, and the last was 1961. None of them have any Poirot, none of them have any Miss Marple. I'm not actually sure if any of them is a murder mystery. But I suppose they just kind of capture that decade from a different point of view from her typical murder mystery type crime type stories. So They Came to Baghdad is, as you might guess, set partially in Baghdad, and that's I guess it's an interesting location for Agatha Christie because she was quite familiar with the area. She went many times to the Middle East and including to Baghdad as part of archaeological expeditions conducted by her husband, which she actively participated in to an extent, and she definitely drew on that experience here, and I found it very entertaining that the main one of the main characters in this, Victoria Jones, actually has to pose as an undercover archaeologist at one point, or in fact she's pretending to be an anthropologist, and goes to a dig site, and there's this kind of thing where she doesn't really know what's going on, so in between things she's popping to the bookshelf and trying to look up information and trying to drop in phrases that make it sound like she knows what she's doing, and I had this really nice idea that was like Agatha Christie herself. Her first experience on a dig was like, oh, everyone knows what they're talking about, I better do some quick reading to catch up. So this is, I guess it's more like a spy story, and I didn't enjoy it, and typically I know that's my experience. I don't enjoy Agatha Christie as much when she's not writing murders. I just think that was what she absolutely excelled at. She knew that she had a good thing going there, and that's why she did so many of them. And okay, fair enough, sometimes in her dozens of books, sometimes she wanted to branch out. It contains a lot of the same features as a typical Christie story. There's lots of different names. You're trying to keep track of, is this the person that I need to be suspicious of? Is this the person? Maybe. There's lots of little facts and little interesting nuggets of information, like, oh, do we need to pay attention to the thickness of that rope or whatever, that you're trying to kind of keep track of and bring together in your mind. But I find that when she kind of delves into international politics, and this one it's a big kind of conspiracy theory, it's less, I find it harder to suspend disbelief. It's less convincing, because honestly it's quite far-fetched, and she makes a big deal about the fact that, oh, it's so far-fetched, nobody's going to believe this conspiracy, and that was in the story, but that was also what I felt as the reader. So yeah, it's still got the really good pacing. It's got the kind of stock characters they expect to have. I did enjoy Victoria Jones as an individual. She's very kind of like go for it. She's a great character, and the feature that she has is that she's very good at telling lies just off the cuff, which equips her well for her unexpected journey into, as I said, undercover anthropology and being a kind of like a spy, and we're not really ever convinced whose side she's spying for. I don't think she even bothers to ask. She just kind of goes for it because she's up for the adventure. I would say that there are a couple of bad guys. As always with Agatha Christie, you're trying to work out who might be the bad guy, even if it's not a murderer. I found it too obvious. It was so obvious to the point that I thought it can't possibly be that person, because if it was, it would be 100 times too obvious. And then as I was reading the book, I was thinking it's really going to be him. But I won't tell you anymore because you'll work it out for yourself if you do decide to read this book. Yeah, so I was a little bit disappointed, I suppose, that the twist wasn't as effective, just because if you were going to list the characters on a board and I didn't tell you anything about it, that would be the name that you'd pick out as being like the one that would obviously be secretly the villain. So for me, the real highlight of this book was little snippets of information about the 1950s, I suppose, or the kind of this turn of the decade, in the aftermath of the Second World War, there's a lot of talk about kind of young men return from the fighting out of work and the impact that has on them. There's a lot of talk about the kind of destabilization of the Middle East and how that's affected how people can pass through and what happens to people there. And I suppose that's why it provides kind of like a fertile environment for her to create this kind of conspiracy theory type idea. I would say, and I have to say it, of course, it's a 1950s book. It's by Agatha Christie. It's set in what was at the time a colony. It does include some gems of colonialist mentality about the people living in the region. I'm not going to share any with you as quotes. I'm sure you can probably imagine. None of them are objectively vile, but they're just the typical kind of very patronising, very paternalistic, very much not acknowledging at all that these were people with their own views, desires, opinions, lives, cultures. So we'll leave that aside. I will just read, I think, 2 quotes that I tagged, just for the kind of the 1950s setting, I suppose. So the first one is Victoria Jones, and she's just been fired from a job. And I've told you she's good at lying. This isn't the reason that she got fired, but this is what she says about it. And I think it's a paragraph that resonates for me. At the moment, it's a paragraph that kind of reflects our modern era in terms of like Me Too type things, and it's just the way that it's kind of the handled in this paragraph. I found it interesting. So she's gone back to the employment agency to look for a job. Dear me, Miss Jones, not out of a post again. I really hoped this last one. Quite impossible, said Victoria firmly. I really couldn't begin to tell you what I had to put up with. A pleasurable flush rose in Miss Spencer's pallid cheek. Not, she began. I do hope not. He didn't seem to me really that sort of man, but of course he is a trifle gross. I do hope... It's quite all right, said Victoria. She conjured up a pale, brave smile. I can take care of myself. Oh, of course, but it's the unpleasantness. Yes, Victoria said. It is unpleasant. However, she smiled bravely again. So just this idea of women increasingly being in the workforce, increasingly being not exactly independent in the workforce, but moving into careers that were previously like in office environments, I suppose, that previously had less women in them, and that how completely believable Victoria is able to make that lie, and I suppose, unfortunately, how it continues to be kind of a believable situation for a young woman to find herself in. The other one that I really loved is Victoria getting on a plane for the first time, and I love this because commercial plane travel was still so early in its existence, and the sense of awe and excitement that she has here, and the sense also that Christie is writing to an audience who mostly wouldn't have been on a plane. So I really liked this couple of paragraphs here. Louder and louder, fiercer and fiercer. Then once more the aeroplane moved forward, mincingly at first, then faster, faster still. They were rushing along the ground. It will never go up, thought Victoria. We'll be killed. Faster, more smoothly, no jars, no bumps. They were off the ground, skimming along, up, round, back over the car park and the main road, up, higher, a silly little train puffing below. Dolls' houses, toys, cars on roads. Higher still, and suddenly the earth below lost interest, was no longer human or alive, just a large flat map with lines and circles and dots. Inside the plane, people undid their safety belts, lit cigarettes and opened magazines. Lit cigarettes, I mean, it's classic of 1950s air travel. And just one more thing that kind of is pertaining to the conspiracy, but it's a little tiny political snippet in the book, and then I'll finish there with the review. So he's talking about the people that are trying to change the world maliciously. They are not, we think, of any special nationality. What they want is, I fear, the betterment of the world, the delusion that by force you can impose the millennium, by which she means the progress, I suppose, on the human race is one of the most dangerous delusions in existence. Those who are only out to line their own pockets can do little harm. Mere greed defeats its own ends. But the belief in a superstratum of human beings, in supermen to rule the world, to rule the rest of the decadent world, that, Victoria, is the most evil of all beliefs. And I found that interesting in a book that's also very much, as I've mentioned, grown out of a colonial mindset. So anyway, so that was a short review of Agatha Christie's They Came to Baghdad. Let me know if you've read it, if you've any intention of reading it, and take care. Good night, everyone.